the Pearses in Queensland.
Brian Pearse.
Brian Pearse. Brian Pearse.
Brian Pearse.
And Brian Pearse.
And Brian Pearse.
Like most parents, Brian Pearse first heard about BMX from his kids, who were keen to try the sport. In the late 1970s, BMX components were hard to come by and BMX clothing even harder. Brian's wife Jan began making race clothing for the family, and soon orders began pouring in from every other parent also wanting the same cool race gear for their kids. At the time, Brian was working as an importer, so naturally he decided to start importing BMX bikes and components. Eventually the Pearse family would open the Centenary BMX shop, selling iconic brands like GT, Robinson, Haro and Patterson. During these early days, Brian would play an instrumental role in starting the Centenary BMX Club. What initially started as a small idea supplying racing nylons to the locals soon blossomed into the Pedal Power race clothing brand. By 1979, Pedal Power had a small factory team attending race meets all over the country. In the early 1980s, Brian took over the reins of the incredibly successful GT racing team and would continue to handpick some of the best racers in the country. His all-star teams included champions such as Lee Egan, Paul Adams, Tylee Muxlow, Anthony Way and Tracy Kozakowski. Brian's dedication to his teams was unmatched. He would personally drive many of them all over the country, putting in hundreds of hours behind the wheel. Whether it was the iconic Pedal Power van or the eye-catching Trans Am, Brian's commitment to his team was unrivaled. The Pedal Power brand was sold on in the mid-1980s, but Brian would manage his highly successful teams well into the 90s. He eventually retired from BMX later that decade to spend time with his wife Jan, who is sadly no longer with us. Ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure that we welcome Hall of Fame inductee and industry icon Brian Pearse.